Hi there! It's too early into the game for an in-depth character guide, but the developers designed 2 trial battle stages so that we can get a glimpse of what Haru is capable of, and potentially what late game may look like. In this video, I will go over these staged fights to provide a first impression of Haru's performance and team setups. The first battle shows her in a hyper carry setup alongside Cassius and Mika, who are here to cycle cards and generate AP. All characters on this team have very specific upgrades and card copies to make this work, so think of this trial battle as a showcase of her optimally performing team, which is to say with ideal save data, rather than what you'd experience on a Chaos run where you start from nothing and have to contend with RNG upgrades. Let's talk about these supports first. Cassius' core gimmick revolves around the creation of quests via his upgrade card Pop-Eyed Popper. Quests are simply put zero-cost cards with effects that range from dealing damage, providing buffs, to drawing cards. Normally, this selects a random quest out of 4 possible options, but this epiphany lets him choose one of his quests, thereby eliminating the RNG when it comes to his role on the team. Since he's here to help with deck cycling, you want to select his Full House quest, which draws 1 card. In line with that role, he also has 3 copies of Devil Dice in deck, which is another card draw, here with the upgrade to reduce its cost to 0. Having 2 duplicates of a card is possible starting from level 30 onwards, where dungeons have 2 stages that each grant the opportunity for card duplication. You'd have to be very lucky though to get his card as an option both times. Cassius is a little more complex than most other characters, so you'll have an easier time understanding his kit in action. Mika has a copy of Source of Water in deck for more AP generation, as well as all upgrades that add wave to her cards. Wave is tracked by the light bulbs next to her picture. Once you reach 3 stacks, you automatically restore 1 AP. She's a very straightforward heal battery. As for Haru, the core of her kit is Anchor Shot, which is a massive single target nuke that gets stronger with each use up to 5 times. She has skill cards that buff its damage or draw it from the deck. In this trial, she's running 2 copies of Anchor Pointer, which is a skill that draws Anchor Shot with the Retrieve tag upgrade, so that the card will return to hand after use. That way, you could draw and play Anchor Shot multiple times within a turn, assuming your AP allow for its repeated use. On turn 1, we start with Mika's cards to stack up wave and fish for an additional card with Cassius. We didn't draw his Pop-Eyed Popper to get his Full House quest up and running, but Dice Trick is setting us up for that moment. Mika's Source of Water generates 2 AP for us since we reached the 3rd stack of wave, allowing us to make good use of Anchor Pointer to draw Anchor Shot. We don't have any buffs active on Haru, but since Anchor Shot gets stronger with each use, we want to do this as often and quickly as we can. On the next turn, the extra draw gets us another Anchor Pointer, so we get to repeat the process. Since we have the AP, we can also use Charge Energy for a 40% damage bonus. I'm not sure yet if the developers changed how damage bonuses work in the game, but in Haru's case her buffs are not simply additive to her skill multipliers. This 40% bonus translates to an effective increase in damage of about 25%. Of course, with a crit anything looks better. Haru has about 50% crit rate in this trial battle. Turn 3 finally gets Pop-Eyed Popper into our hand, so we can start the Full House quest, which requires that we play a card from every character. I use his Joker to get Anchor Pointer so that we can draw Anchor Shot. Doing it this way counts as more cards for his quest. Since we are short on AP, we can only play Anchor Shot to get another increase to its multiplier. Haru's buffs cards have the retain tag though, so we simply carry over Lift Anchor to the next round. On turn 4, our setup is just right to go in for a big hit, even though the opponent is almost dead. So I buff up with Haru, and alongside the morale boost from Cassius, her Anchor Shot reaches a 1100 skill multiplier. Unfortunately, no crit, but still more damage than all previous hits. On the next round, we just try to improve our hand with Cassius' card draws. To get more Full House cards, we need to alternate the cards from the characters. Note that his quest cards don't count towards the next quest. After essentially cycling through our entire deck, we finally have all the relevant cards in hand. This demonstrates how easily this team setup could fall apart without such utility. Anchor Shot is almost fully stacked, now with an unbuffed multiplier of 750%. After playing her buff cards, we're again up at 1100%, which this time is rewarded with a critical hit. We can also use this opportunity to have a look at her ego skill, which deals more damage based on the number of currently active buffs. This includes really anything the team has going on and doesn't just refer to Haru's buffs. This has no ceiling, so in theory the multiplier could get very high, but here we only have 6 buffs active. Unfortunately, no crit again, but next to Anchor Shot it doesn't look very impressive given its massive EP cost. After a few more card draws, we finish the fight with another Anchor Shot nuke, now at a 1300% damage multiplier. That enemy was blown to smithereens. Moving on to the second trial, which showcases a Celestial team setup, though still fielding Mika as a battery with the same cards and upgrades. Celestial is a tag that automatically activates a card if another 2 cost or higher card is played, which Haru's Anchor Shot can be a driver for. Amir is now able to gain Celestial via her Epiphanies, making her an accessible example on this stage, though Calliope would be a less defensive option. Of course, this also highlights a potential synergy with future characters that have Celestial in their kits. Moreover, Haru's signature partner's Ego skill buffs her damage based on the total cost of all cards in hand, so she benefits from other characters that have high cost cards in their decks. This time, Haru has 2 copies of Power Charge in her deck with the Epiphany to buff her next attack card according to the number of targets hit. Here, 2 opponents equate to a 60% increase of Anchor Shot's multiplier when chained after Power Charge. Since Anchor Shot gets to an extremely high multiplier, this bonus won't be too noticeable in this fight, but it's something that can be useful against bosses who summon adds. Then, Anchor Shot has an upgrade which duplicates itself twice per battle. This is combined with an upgrade of Anchor Pointer that adds a retrieve tag to Anchor Shot for a round. This setup fully leans into her partner's Eagle skill, which grants more bonus damage based on the hand's total card cost. Aside from that, it's honestly hard to play multiple Anchor Shots in a turn, since Mika won't be generating as much AP without a deck cycler. This fight features shielded opponents so that we get to see the benefit of her Pulverize effect, which grants 20% bonus damage against shields. Our initial hand is pretty unremarkable, so we simply start with Mika's setup and use up all our cards. On the next turn, we draw Anchor Pointer, but remember that it no longer draws Anchor Shot. Since this setup relies on Anchor Shot's self-duplication, the ramp up can be a bit slow. With Amir, you're looking at too many defensive cards for this showcase. Here, we're reducing our damage taken by 100%, but taking 0 damage isn't really the point of making Haru look good. On turn 3, we finally draw Anchor Shot. Starting with Power Charge, we gain 60% bonus damage. When hovering Anchor Shot over the target, you can see that the Pulverize and Weakness damage almost double the skill's multiplier. As the skill hits, a copy of Anchor Shot gets added to our deck. On the next turn, I simply finish off the opponent and create another Anchor Shot in deck, now at a total of 3 copies. For the second wave, I wanted to demonstrate her partner's Ego skill. With high cost cards in hand, it grants up to 200% bonus damage to Haru. Since I'm not fully there yet, I add Retrieve to Anchor Shot and wait another turn. This time, our total hand cost reaches the limit of 10, so it's time to buff up. Here, we see the effects of her partner and from her card Charge Energy, which seems to provide its bonus according to the number of Haru's attack cards, rather than any attack card in hand. Regardless, Anchor Shot is at a multiplier of 1140%, reaching 1500% due to Pulverize and Weakness damage. Clearly, Haru is designed for the screenshot factor, since everyone loves big numbers. That said, my first impression of Haru is that she's amongst the hardest hitting damage dealers in the game, likely surpassing Kairon and Rin in her ideal matchup. We'll have to reach late game to see how common shielded opponents will be, but I'm sure Haru will be the prime choice for such situations. Making her work in my first Chaos run seemed more challenging in my first attempts, since her kit doesn't flow too well out of the gate, not to mention that these supports also require very specific upgrades to make her shine. Therefore, I'm currently seeing her more as a late game character that will be useful to tackle certain challenges, but less suited for early game progression. As the first rate up, I think her power level is perfectly fine and doesn't outclass the rest of the roster. I don't think you'd be wrong to reroll for her, but she doesn't seem like a must-have character. She will also be added to the standard pool after the rate up ends, so there's no need to rush getting her. In any case, Let me know whether you're enjoying CZN's early game experience. Are you going for Haru or are you saving up? Thank you so much for watching. See you next time.